They say when disaster strikes, a community comes together. But on Maplewood Lane, when flames reached for the sky and sirens shattered the quiet calm, it wasn't unity that showed up first. It was Karen Donaldson, the HOA president with a god complex and a pair of freshly sharpened garden shears. As the fire truck screeched to a halt and firefighters rushed to save the Miller family's home, Karen stormed out of her colonial-style fortress like a suburban warlord, arms flailing and voice screeching about rules and unauthorized parking. And then, in a moment that would be burned into neighborhood lore forever, she marched straight up to the bright yellow fire hose, shouted something about crushed tulips, and cut the hose mid-operation. Water exploded into the air, firefighters cursed, and within seconds, the front half of the Miller home collapsed in a rain of embers and screams. It wasn't just the fire that scorched the street that day. It was the collective fury of a neighborhood watching a self-entitled dictator pick flowers over lives. Earlier that morning, it had been business as usual in the sleepy cul-de-sac. Birds chirped, sprinklers rotated, and the distant scent of someone over-toasting a bagel wafted through the air. Raj Patel was fiddling with his drone in his garage, Sasha recorded a dance routine for her TikTok followers, and Dale, the resident Vietnam vet, grunted disapproval at a squirrel too bold for its own good. Everything was normal, until Linda called out from her porch, phone clutched to her chest, eyes wide with panic. Smoke. Thick, black, rising from house number 17. Within minutes, neighbors had poured onto the street as fire engines roared around the corner. The Millers weren't answering their door. The firefighters moved with precision and purpose. One connected the hose to the hydrant, the other crashed through the front door, and a third directed the growing crowd to stand back. And they would have had it under control in record time, if not for her. Karen Donaldson wasn't just the HOA president, she was the self-declared guardian of Maplewood Lane's aesthetic standards. A former middle school principal turned full-time control freak, Karen believed in order, appearances, and above all, the sanctity of the rose garden pathway that curved along the center of the street like a suburban red carpet. So when she saw the fire truck's tires resting on what she called Maplewood's crown jewel, she reacted not with concern for the Millers or admiration for the firefighters, but with blinding, self-righteous rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she shrieked, storming past the barricade tape. A firefighter turned, confused. Karen's eyes were wild, nostrils flaring. "You're destroying HOA-approved landscaping. You can't park here. This is a protected pathway." "Ma'am, there's a fire," the firefighter replied, stunned but professional. "We're trying to save lives." Karen was not having it. She launched into a tirade about bylaws, landscaping funds, and how she had personally won a regional award for community beautification. She waved her clipboard like a sword, then, to everyone's horror, she spotted the hose, fully pressurized, laid out across her precious tiles. "No. Absolutely not," she shouted. Then she did the unthinkable. No one moved fast enough. She sprinted back to her garage, returning with a pair of heavy-duty garden shears, the kind usually reserved for decapitating stubborn shrubs. With the crazed determination of someone avenging 1,000 dandelions, she knelt down, and before anyone could stop her, she snipped the hose clean in half. A geyser of water burst upward. The firefighter closest to the house slipped, cursed, and fell. The rest of the team scrambled to seal the rupture, but the seconds lost were fatal. Inside, the fire roared. Windows shattered. The front beam gave way. Flames leapt onto the porch. The crowd gasped as the Miller's cat launched itself from a second-story window. One firefighter dove and caught it mid-air. Another screamed for backup. It was chaos, pure and terrifying. And standing in the middle of it all was Karen, arms crossed, smirking with the satisfaction of someone who had, in her mind, restored order. But order was not what followed. By the time the fire was out, the Miller family had lost nearly everything. Smoke damage in the bedrooms. Kitchen incinerated. Their son's high school championship trophies melted. The neighborhood stood in silence, disbelief painted across every face. Karen offered no apology. Instead, she gave a lecture about proper vehicle routing in community spaces. They could have used the main road, she muttered. I told them, but nobody listens to me. The firefighters didn't argue. They were too stunned. The fire chief glared at Karen with a mix of horror and pity. You endangered lives, he said. People could have died. But Karen wasn't listening. She was already inspecting her begonias. No one could believe it. The incident made the local news by that evening. Footage of Karen mid-snip aired on the 6 o'clock broadcast, right after a story about a stolen inflatable gorilla. Commenters online dubbed her, Hose Hacker Karen. The clip was shared thousands of times. The subreddit entitled People practically exploded. Meanwhile, the HOA released a short, sterile statement. The Homeowners Association regrets the events of today and is reviewing safety protocols. That was it. No condemnation, no apology to the Millers, and certainly no action against Karen. Why? Because Karen was the HOA. Neighbors whispered in driveways. Raj considered digging into the HOA bylaws. Sasha began drafting a video. Dale cleaned his shotgun, mumbling about this kind of nonsense never flying back in '68. And as the sun set over Maplewood Lane, casting a golden glow on the scorched remains of the Miller home, something changed in the air. Not just smoke or ash, but resolve. Karen had finally gone too far. And the residents? They were done waiting for justice. They were going to deliver it themselves. The morning after the fire was quieter than usual on Maplewood Lane. The smell of smoke still lingered, woven into every leaf, every mailbox, every child's backpack as they passed the scorched husk of the Miller home on their way to school. Yellow caution tape fluttered in the breeze like some cruel party decoration. A pile of blackened wood and half-melted siding sat where the front porch used to be, and a lonely basketball, once belonging to the Miller's son, rested at the curb, its surface singed and deflated. No one spoke much. It was the kind of silence that didn't just fall, it settled, heavy, accusing, and long overdue. The Miller family stood by their driveway, their faces blank from exhaustion. Mrs. Miller clutched a binder of insurance documents with trembling fingers while Mr. Miller tried to explain to their son that his favorite dog-eared comics might be salvageable from the garage. They had slept in a hotel that night, or at least tried to. Every time someone coughed or a hallway door slammed, their youngest started crying again. The fire may have been put out, but it was still burning in their minds. A van from the local news station was parked at the edge of the cul-de-sac, its antenna reaching for a signal while the anchor rehearsed her lines, glancing nervously toward the Miller home. A second van pulled up shortly after. This one wasn't here for a story, it was from a cleaning and restoration service. And right behind that came another vehicle, Karen Donaldson's spotless, pearl-white Lexus. She got out wearing a crisp beige pantsuit and sunglasses that looked like they cost more than most people's monthly rent. In her hand was a clipboard. The neighbors stiffened as they saw her approach the Millers with all the delicacy of a tax auditor at a wedding. "I hope you've filed a damage report," Karen said, without greeting or empathy. "For both your house and the community landscaping. Those rose tiles took years to cultivate." Mrs. Miller blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Karen didn't miss a beat. The fire truck left tire marks on the walking path. "I'm compiling a list of violations. Your home's siding melted onto HOA property, which technically counts as debris encroachment." Mr. Miller took a step forward, jaw clenched. "Our house burned down. And we all regret that terribly," Karen replied, in the tone of someone offering thoughts and prayers before suing you. "But rules are rules." Several neighbors who had been quietly observing from their porches began stepping forward. Dale, arms folded across his chest. Linda, with her phone out, pretending to check the weather app, but actually recording everything. Raj, squinting behind his glasses with a look that said he was already building a digital dossier. Karen sensed the tension but stood firm. She was confident in her status, her power. After all, she'd been untouchable for years. Who was going to challenge her? These people? Please. By noon, 5 of those people had gathered at Raj's house under the pretense of a neighborhood watch meeting. They didn't call it what it was, yet, but every person in the room knew exactly why they were there. Operation Karma hadn't been named yet, but the mission was already clear. I mean, she literally cut a hose. Who does that? Sasha exclaimed, pacing back and forth in Raj's living room. She's insane, Benny said, pulling out a thick manila folder. And I think I can prove she's also criminally negligent. This, he said, slapping the folder down, is a copy of the state fire code. Raj leaned over. Didn't she get charged? Linda shook her head. Misdemeanor at best. She's claiming she didn't realize it was an active hose. Says she thought it was just decorative. And her brother, Councilman Donaldson, pulled strings. She walked. She cut a hose, Dale growled. During a fire. Raj was already typing on his laptop. If we can't get her legally, maybe we can get her another way. HOA violations, financials, backdoor approvals. She leaves a trail. Yeah, Sasha added, smirking. Like a raccoon in a Prada tracksuit. Everyone laughed, just a little. The first laugh since the fire. It felt good. Raj brought up the HOA website. Password protected. He grinned. I'll be in by morning. Back on the street, Karen was holding her own HOA meeting on her front porch. A folding table, a few clipboards, and a makeshift sign that read Emergency Landscaping Review. She spoke to 3 board members, each looking like they desperately wanted to be anywhere else. Karen outlined the need for new HOA rules. No emergency vehicle parking on decorative pathways, a review of fire engine size for future access, and a proposal to charge a fine for negligent combustion. The board nodded, but weakly. Ever since the incident, their trust in her had frayed. One of them, Martha, even suggested sending the Millers a small gift basket. Karen rejected the idea immediately. We can't reward recklessness, she snapped. That's how you lose order. But order was already gone. Later that night, Sasha posted the hose-cutting video to her growing social media following. No captions, no edits, just raw footage. Within hours, it was being shared across multiple platforms. Comments ranged from disbelief to fury to memes featuring Karen photoshopped as a villain in various action movies. One favorite was her cutting a fire hose on the Titanic. Another had her chasing a firefighter with shears on a Grand Theft Auto loading screen. The next morning, the neighborhood woke up to find the video had reached 1 million views. The HOA inbox exploded. By that afternoon, Karen had issued 23 new violations. One for Linda's mailbox being too whimsical. Another for Raj's drone, violating community airspace. She fined Benny for an unauthorized birdbath, and cited Dale for aggressive lawn gnome placement. But the residents weren't retreating. They were planning. Benny poured through fire regulations. Linda sifted through 5 years of HOA minute. Sasha was building a narrative. Raj had cracked the HOA website and found a suspicious invoice. $5,000 allocated to water features. The name listed? Karen Donaldson. The address? Hers. Ladies and gentlemen, Raj said, turning his laptop toward the group, she built a koi pond with HOA money. Dale snorted. She's gonna wish she only cut a hose. A new fire had ignited on Maplewood Lane, not of smoke and ash, but of quiet rebellion. The kind that grows behind smiles and garden hedges, whispered across fences, plotted during bake sales. The neighborhood had finally reached its boiling point. And Karen? She had no idea what was coming. It started small, as most rebellions do. A plastic pink flamingo appeared overnight in the middle of Karen's meticulously trimmed front yard. The next day another. By the end of the week, there were 12, arranged in a semicircle around her koi pond, like they were holding a tiny intervention. Karen, of course, was livid. She stormed onto her lawn at 6:45 in the morning with a trash bag and a face full of fury. yanking up flamingos like weeds while muttering something about neighborhood hooligans and property values. But every morning new ones appeared. Some had sunglasses. One was painted like a fire truck. The message was clear. The neighborhood was done playing nice. Inside Raj's garage, Operation Karma was in full swing. A whiteboard covered in timelines, offenses, and strategy was mounted behind the tool bench. Sasha had pinned up screenshots from the viral video comments. Benny had brought donuts. Dale just stood in the corner sipping black coffee, nodding like a general surveying his troops. Raj clicked through a slideshow of HOA spending reports. There were charges for things like water feature maintenance, emergency flora replacement, and a baffling $2,000 listed as Community Harmony Consulting. All roads pointed to Karen's koi pond and her bizarre obsession with decorative shrubs. I cross-checked invoices with our landscaper, Raj explained, clicking to a spreadsheet. Turns out, Karen's been double-charging the HOA. She submits a bill from the landscaper, then another from a shell company she owns. Linda leaned forward. A shell company? Donaldson Eco Aesthetics. It's literally run out of her garage. Dale snorted. You mean the garage where she keeps the shears? Exactly. Sasha clapped her hands. All right, so we've got fraud, misuse of community funds, probable blackmail, and felony-level flamingo intolerance. Benny grinned. We need to go bigger. This is war. And so the pranks escalated. Not childish or random, but carefully calculated acts of satirical sabotage. Benny, using his old firefighter contacts, borrowed a retired fire hydrant. It was placed in front of Karen's house with a plaque reading, "In loving memory of common sense." Sasha organized a flash mob of local teens to perform a fire-themed dance routine in front of Karen's driveway, complete with hose props and siren sound effect. Linda put together a fake newsletter issue with headlines like "Karen wins National Hose Cutting Championship" and "Maplewood's Fire Hazard Queen expands empire." Karen lost her mind. She began attending HOA board meetings in full military-style attire, complete with shoulder pads and boots that clacked like thunder. She proposed a curfew. A curfew. For a suburban neighborhood mostly populated by retirees, toddlers, and hobbyist bird watchers. She demanded the removal of any decorations not approved by her directly. Lawn gnomes, garden flags, wind chimes. She banned all fire-themed decorations, including an unfortunate boy's birthday party where the cake was a small fire truck. The child cried. Karen didn't care. But power was slipping from her fingers faster than she realized. At the next HOA meeting, a record number of residents showed up. Usually, these meetings drew 6 people and a tray of stale cookies. This time, it was standing room only. Karen opened the meeting with a smug smile, but the atmosphere turned icy the moment Raj took the floor. Before we begin, Raj said, clicking a remote, I'd like to present some findings. The projector hummed to life. Slide after slide laid out damning evidence. Altered budgets, unauthorized purchases, personal enrichment. Gasps filled the room as Raj revealed Karen's shell company and the invoices that led straight to her koi pond's extravagant upgrades. Miniature statues, a tiny waterfall, heated rock. Karen tried to cut him off. This is slander. Benny stood. It's public record. Karen turned to the board. You can't let this circus continue. I'm the elected president. I was chosen to uphold this community's standards. And now we're choosing to uphold yours. Martha, one of the board members, replied calmly. A motion for a vote of no confidence was introduced. Tension filled the air like thick fog. Hands raised. The count was close. So close. In the end, Karen survived by 1 vote. 1. She strutted out of the meeting hall with her clipboard high and chin higher, but the cracks were forming. The vote didn't save her. It exposed her. She was no longer untouchable, just temporarily standing. That weekend, Dale hosted a block party. Karen, of course, issued a cease and desist to every household. Unauthorized gathering. No permit. Noise pollution. Nobody listened. Dale, in a red apron that said Grill Sergeant, fired up 3 barbecue grills. Kids ran wild. Music played. Sasha live-streamed the whole thing with the caption, Karen Who? Every food item had a theme. Charred chicken of justice, fire hose fries, scorched ribs of retribution. Karen stood at the edge of the party with her arms crossed and a look of disgust. She called the police. The officers arrived, took one look around, and helped themselves to hot dogs. When Karen complained, they said the block party wasn't violating any city laws. They even posed for a selfie with Sasha. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops and fairy lights twinkled across driveways, Benny unveiled his final touch, a 12-foot inflatable fire truck placed smack in the center of the party. It had a slide, a speaker playing fire engine sounds, and a banner across it that read, "Always be prepared." Karen's scream could probably be heard in the next county. The next morning, every house received a new HOA citation. The offenses were increasingly absurd: lawn too happy, excessive festivity, unauthorized cornhole tournament. Karen was losing it. She was papering the neighborhood with violations like confetti at a sad parade. But her opponents were far from done. Raj's AI bot, developed over 3 nights and 2 gallons of energy drinks, was now auto-generating formal appeals for every citation. It used language from HOA bylaws, case law, and even Karen's own prior rulings to create responses that overwhelmed the board system. Karen had to read each one manually. By the end of the week, she was drowning in bureaucratic backlash of her own making. Linda leaked a document showing Karen had attempted to raise HOA dues to fund security upgrades, which included surveillance cameras aimed specifically at Dale's house, Sasha's yard, and the sidewalk in front of Benny's home. The final straw came when a fire inspection notice appeared on Karen's door. Anonymous tip, the letter said. Her koi pond's wiring for the waterfall? Not up to code. Risk of electrical fire. Mandatory shut-off until reviewed. Karen stood in front of her darkened pond, her koi barely visible in the still water, her world unraveling. And then came the fundraiser. Sasha launched it with a single post. Let's show our love for first responders and remind Karen what a real fire truck looks like. The goal was $10,000. In less than 72 hours, it passed 200,000. But they weren't buying a fire truck. They were preparing a gift, the kind you could never return. The delivery arrived on a sunny Saturday morning. It wasn't subtle. A flatbed truck the size of a small apartment rolled into Maplewood Lane with hazard lights flashing and a small police escort, just in case someone, somewhere, tried to interfere. Neighbors poured out of their houses, coffee mugs and phones in hand, squinting toward the massive tarp-covered structure being hoisted by a crane. Karen, sensing chaos of some sort not personally orchestrated by her, bolted from her house in her signature beige tracksuit, clipboard already shaking in one hand like a nervous squirrel. She began shouting before the truck even stopped moving. What is this? Who authorized this? This is not HOA approved. You can't just bring in industrial vehicles. You're violating at least 9 ordinances. The driver hopped out of the cab with an amused smile and handed a thick envelope to Benny, who signed with an exaggerated flourish. Karen tried to snatch the envelope, but Dale intercepted her mid-lunge with a casual step sideways and a firm, "Back off, General Mayhem." The crowd's laughter wasn't even muffled anymore. Once the tarp was pulled back, the neighborhood gasped, cheered, and immediately began filming. Sitting gloriously atop the truck was a 30-foot inflatable fire truck, complete with spinning siren lights, a working slide for kids, and a sound system that played fire truck funk every hour on the hour. It was the kind of thing you might expect at a fire safety fair or maybe a theme park. But here it was, parked directly in front of Karen's home, massive, obnoxiously cheerful, and undeniably magnificent. On the side of the inflatable, printed in bold red letters, was the phrase, "Maplewood Lane remembers." Karen's jaw dropped open like a rusty hinge. "You can't do this. You cannot do this." Benny smiled. "Actually, we can. It's on community property. We filed the paperwork last week. This area is designated for temporary recreational installations. It's approved through the Parks and Rec Board. Raj chimed in, not even bothering to hide his delight. We also invited the local fire department to host safety demonstrations every Saturday. They were very enthusiastic. Karen spun in circles, pointing to everyone, demanding someone take her side. But no one moved. Even the usual HOA sycophants had retreated behind hedges and lawn furniture. Martha, the only board member with a hint of spine left, simply sipped iced tea and gave Karen a little wave. By noon, the fire truck was fully operational. Children were climbing the inflatable ladder and sliding down while wearing plastic firefighter hats. Sasha livestreamed it all, interviewing parents, kids, and one very confused golden retriever. Dale brought out his stereo and played old rock songs with titles like "Burning Down the House" and "We Didn't Start the Fire." Linda baked cupcakes shaped like fire extinguishers. Someone handed out hose-shaped licorice. Karen called the police. Again. 2 officers arrived, same ones from the block party. They looked around, took in the fire truck, the laughing kids, the supportive neighbors, and the legal paperwork taped to the inflatable side. "Looks like everything checks out," one of them said, suppressing a grin. "But it's harassment," Karen shrieked. "It's targeted. It's an attack on my leadership." The other officer scratched his chin. "Ma'am, I don't think you can call it harassment when you literally cut a fire hose. The community's just expressing itself." The phrase, expressing itself, became an inside joke overnight. That evening, after the crowd dispersed and the fire truck stood tall under the glow of solar-powered floodlights, Karen sat on her front porch, a cup of lukewarm tea in her hand, staring blankly at the inflatable monstrosity. Her koi pond was still dry. Her roses were wilting. And the only sound was the occasional fart-like hiss from the fire truck's inflation system. But Karen wasn't done fighting. No, she was just shifting gears. The next morning, the neighborhood woke up to find an avalanche of HOA citations stuffed into their mailboxes, stuck to their windshields, and even taped to some front doors. Unapproved inflatable structure. Unauthorized noise emissions. Reckless use of inflatable slides. Raj received 3 violations, 1 for reckless drone operations, 1 for flagrant Wi-Fi interference, and 1 for sarcasm in a community setting. Linda got fined for aggressive use of cinnamon in public spaces. Sasha got written up for unsanctioned digital influence. Karen was spiraling and everyone could see it, but retaliation wasn't working like it used to. Raj's AI was now not only auto-appealing the citations but was also filing formal complaints with the city's zoning board. Dale contacted a lawyer friend who loved nothing more than dismantling overreaching HOA policies. And Sasha's latest video, Karen vs. the Fire Truck, Dawn of Entitlement, had hit 4.2 million views and was featured on a daytime talk show. Then came the councilman. Karen's brother, Councilman Douglas Donaldson, known for his waxy smile and suspiciously vague job description, appeared in the neighborhood in an attempt to perform damage control. He gave a press conference in front of the still-standing inflatable, urging everyone to remember the value of unity and respect. Raj hacked the councilman's previous speeches and spliced together a remix of him saying, "I can cover up a few hose incidents," over the instrumental to Disco Inferno. It was uploaded under the title Burn Baby Burn. Donaldson remix and went viral overnight. The councilman left within 24 hours. Karen's final card was a lawsuit. She claimed the fire truck, the videos, the memes, even the cupcakes were all part of an orchestrated defamation campaign. She threatened to sue Sasha, Raj, Dale, Benny, Linda, the HOA board, the inflatable company, the fire department, and possibly the golden retriever, though that part was unclear. But her legal notice never made it past the city attorney's inbox. It was denied, dismissed, and quietly laughed out of existence. The city, in fact, began an investigation into Karen. for misuse of HOA funds, intimidation, and obstruction during an emergency response. Then, just when the dust seemed to be settling and the inflatable fire truck had become a permanent fixture every weekend, a strange package arrived at Karen's door. It was hand-delivered by a man wearing a firefighter's jacket. He didn't say a word. Just rang the bell, nodded once, and walked away. Karen opened the box and froze. Inside was a high-resolution framed photograph of the fire that had destroyed the Miller home. The hose, cut in the foreground. A firefighter silhouetted in the smoke. Embers glowing like fireflies. Below the photo was a small brass plaque that read, "To the woman who taught us what not to do." Beneath the frame was a velvet-lined case containing a single garden shear. The blade had been sawed in half. At the very bottom of the box was an official document from the HOA board. It was her removal notice. Effective immediately, Karen Donaldson was no longer president. She was no longer part of the board. She was no longer even a voting member of the Homeowners Association. Her clipboard slipped from her hand. And for the first time in years, Maplewood Lane felt like a community again. The silence that followed Karen's removal was louder than any siren. For the first time in years, there were no citations taped to mailboxes, no angry notices about improperly coiled hoses or wind chimes that tinkled beyond acceptable decibel levels. Her house, once the nucleus of HOA tyranny, stood still and quiet, blinds drawn tight, as if it too was ashamed of its former resident. People walked by with a new kind of swagger, no longer glancing over their shoulders for someone lurking behind a bush with a clipboard. Maplewood Lane was free, and it showed. The Miller family returned to their rebuilt home 3 weeks later. It wasn't the same, of course. Nothing could replace what they lost, but the neighborhood made sure they didn't come back empty-handed. The house had been repainted, refurnished, and restocked with the help of dozens of volunteers. Raj coordinated furniture deliveries. Sasha's followers donated enough to cover the family's groceries for 6 months. Dale and Benny built a fireproof shed out back, just in case. Linda filled the kitchen with baked goods and a handwritten note that read, "Home is people, not drywall." A small ceremony was held in the park at the end of the lane. No official speeches. Just neighbors, laughter, and a sense of peace. The inflatable fire truck made one last appearance, this time adorned with balloons and a sign that read, "Thank you, firefighters." Children climbed, slid, and squealed with joy, while adults shared stories of how they'd each had their own little run-ins with Karen over the years. A man from 4 streets over confessed she'd once fined him for having a mailbox that was too cheerful. Another revealed she made him repaint his shutters 3 times until the shade matched the neighborhood palette. Toward the end of the event, Sasha took the mic and introduced the newest addition to the community. Draped in a red cloth, standing on a stone pedestal in front of the playground, was a life-sized bronze statue of a firefighter holding a hose in one hand and a cat in the other. The plaque beneath read, "In honor of those who protect, serve, and never let a garden shear get in their way." The children dubbed him Sir Hoses-a-Lot. He quickly became the unofficial guardian of Maplewood Lane. Every morning, kids high-fived him on their way to school. Meanwhile, Karen moved. Not right away. For a week, she stayed inside, blinds shut, occasionally peeking out like a raccoon in the daylight. Rumors swirled. Some said she was planning revenge, others thought she was drafting a memoir. But in the end, it was a for-sale sign that appeared on her lawn, not a plot for a comeback. She left without a word, packing her koi into a plastic tub and driving off in silence. Her departure was met not with celebration, but with quiet relief. It was over. But karma has a long memory. 3 months later, Sasha received a message from a friend in a different neighborhood, along with a blurry video. Karen had moved into a new HOA-controlled community across town. At first, she laid low. But by the second week, she was already leaving passive-aggressive notes about trash bins and threatening to revamp community standards. The clip showed Karen standing in front of a house, yelling at a teenager for using a sparkler on the 4th of July. The camera then shifted to reveal the house she had moved into. Next door to a retired fire chief, and across the street from a group home for off-duty paramedic. Within a week, a red lawn chair appeared on her driveway, labeled Firewatch Post. A garden flag was raised next door featuring a cartoon fire truck and the phrase, "We're always on call." A local bakery delivered a welcome basket with cookies shaped like hoses, axes, and hydrants. The neighborhood had been warned. Back on Maplewood Lane, peace wasn't just the absence of Karen, it was the presence of something new. Neighbors who once only waved in passing now gathered for potlucks, trivia nights, and even a monthly movie night projected on the side of Benny's garage. The HOA was reorganized with new leadership, transparency, and a firm policy on never electing anyone with a personal brand of vengeance. Raj expanded his AI system into a community management tool, helping track budgets, schedule maintenance, and auto-detect weird charges like koi food under community enhancement. Linda launched a local blog where she wrote stories of suburban survival, including one titled, "The Day the Hose Cried." Sasha's videos continued to grow, and she eventually got a sponsorship from a home security company, though she refused to promote garden shears. And then came the final delivery. A small box, unmarked, arrived at Karen's former address, now occupied by a kindly older couple who kept to themselves and regularly handed out lemon bars. The couple handed the package to Dale, unsure what to do with it. Inside, wrapped in red tissue paper, was a tiny hose nozzle, gold-plated, clean-cut. Alongside it, a note written in perfect cursive. For the ones who kept the fire going, just not the one in the house. No signature. No return address. Just closure. The gift was placed in the community hall, in a glass case beneath a photo collage of the eventful year. The fire, the fundraiser, the inflatable, and, of course, Sir Hosesalot standing tall among it all. It became a symbol, not just of what had happened, but of what the neighborhood had become. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about accountability. About laughter in the face of pettiness, unity in the wake of absurdity, and resilience in the form of cupcakes, flamingos, and inflatable engines of justice. Karen had ruled by fear and citation. Maplewood Lane chose humor and fireproof friendship. And so, as the seasons changed and new families moved in, the stories were passed down. The tale of Karen and the hose became legend, part cautionary tale, part suburban folklore. And every time someone new asked about the golden nozzle in the display case, someone would lean in, smile, and begin. "Let me tell you about the time our HOA president cut a fire hose, and got exactly what she deserved."